I know, I guess.
It's for
Everyone-
something for voting on.
Maybe it's fine. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. So February, we're good, and then from March. We'll just. I think get the meeting started. Thank you so much, Eric. I appreciate that. That's where it's gonna be. So welcome to the Desert Healthcare District Board Meeting, special meeting of the Board of Directors, April 1st, 2026. We're gonna go ahead and call this meeting to order at 30 p.m. Can we go ahead and get roll call, please?
Director Smith, Director Rogers,
Here.
Director Perezfield,
Here.
Director Lobster, Secretary Delara,
Here.
Vice President Rodriguez cannot join us tonight, President Plaza.
Thank you. And then if you could join me for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now, item C, approval of the agenda.
I'll move approval.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
In opposition, we're gonna go ahead and move on to the next item, C. Excuse me, D, public comment. At this time, comments from the audience may be made on items not listed on the agenda that are of public interest and within the subject matter jurisdiction of the district. The board has a policy of limiting speakers to no more than 3 minutes. The board cannot take action on items not listed on the agenda. Public input may be offered on agenda items when they come up for discussion and or action. Do we have any public comments?
Do we have any items on the agenda? Please step to the podium.
Okay.
And introduce yourself again.
I'm myself so that I don't go over. All right, thank you all. For many of you, this is going to be a repeat of what you heard 48 hours ago, but some of you weren't there. So I'm Dr. Jenna LeCount Heinley. I am the CEO of HARC, which stands for Health Assessment and Research for Communities. HARC is a local research and evaluation organization. In fact, our office is right here. And we were founded 20 years ago by Desert Healthcare District and Foundation and spun off into our own nonprofit in 2006. Our flagship service, the reason we were founded was to provide local data about our Coachella Valley's health, wellness, and quality of life. So we do that by every 3 years. We conduct the Coachella Valley Community Health Survey and give that data back to the community for free. That data includes things like healthcare access and utilization, mental health, loneliness and isolation, food insecurity, socioeconomic needs, environmental health, and a whole lot more. But we do more than just that. We also do consulting services and have for the past 15, 16 years. We do evaluation, including collective evaluation impact. We do needs assessments, data analyses, and we work with more than 100 of our local partners here, whether that is nonprofits or healthcare agencies, the school districts, the local cities. We help everybody to try to be more data-driven in their quest for doing good things in our community. So whether that's things like evaluation of a fall prevention program at a senior center or a needs assessment related to violence prevention for the county. We are fortunate enough to be a part of many of these things. However, due to unfortunate circumstances, HARC is now in financial trouble. It's a combination of many factors. There's no one thing to blame, but we are in danger of closing our doors. And I have decided to be very public about this in the hopes that we can pull through, figure something out, and not lose this valuable resource that has been serving the Coachella Valley for 20 years. We really believe that we are an asset to our Coachella Valley community, and we are hopeful that there is some win-win way that Desert Healthcare District and HARC can work together to make sure that we don't go under, that we can support your various pillars of your strategic plan and benefit all of our community members in positive ways. So I'm here today to listen and to hopefully advocate for us. And I hope that all of you will think about HARC and ways in which we can support you in a strategic plan going forward in ways that will be mutually beneficial help us keep our doors open. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Did you have anything that's not on the agenda, Dr. Sullivan?
Believe it or not, no other public comment.
Thank you, then we're gonna go ahead and on to our next strategic planning workshop. Sophie, thank you so much. Okay, we're gonna load up the presentation. My speaking part is very short today. Wanted to make sure that you know that Billy and Angelica are with us for the SOAN team online. Ori and Leah are with me here in person. And now that we have an approved strategic plan with the pillars and the goals and the key initiatives outlined and approved by the board, we are going to move to talking about what an impact framework could look like to make sure that we're making progress against the plan that we just decided on. And I'm going to hand it over to Ori to take us through that. And then once Ori is done, again, one of these workshops are sometimes difficult to gauge in terms of time of discussion, but we hope to have enough time to also start the discussion about the financial sustainability framework that we would like to also use to bring the strategy to life. Ori.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for being here today. Every strategy has to have a impact measurement framework so that we can know as we are implementing it, whether things are on track, what's working, what's not working, whether there are gaps that we haven't thought about, whether there are opportunities. It's really important to keep in mind that what we're going to present to you today isn't a finished product. It still needs evolution. It still needs a lot of decisions. It still needs a lot of additional next steps that we will do with you guys, but mostly our team on the ground, because we're going to be defining what metrics we're collecting at the different levels. But what we wanted to share with you today is how, now that we have a structured strategy, right? We know what our pillars are, our goals are, our initiatives are. We can start thinking about what are the ways in which we want to measure the progress of those things and the ways in which we want to reflect the impact of those things to our stakeholders, whether those are internal, individuals within the team who need to know whether what we're doing, where we're investing is working or not working, whether it's externally to our partners, and most importantly, to the residents, right? Whether we are fulfilling our vision and mission as an organization.
Can I ask you to stand on the little part of your?
Of course, of course. So, is this better?
Better.
Oh, and now I can take some air into my lungs and project.
Do you
So,
want to switch places?
yeah, so that's really the goal of an impact measurement framework. If we could skip to the next slide. Next one. So a good impact measurement framework will help us essentially drive every aspect of our strategic plan, right? A good impact measurement framework will allow us to get proactive in each one of these areas. And as I go through them, you'll see that as we start thinking about the ways in which we want to operate, this covers everything. Everything that we do, everything that we should think about falls in some way, shape, or form into these areas of work, right? So a good impact measurement strategy will help us understand whether we are staying true to our vision and mission as an organization, whether we are focusing on the right areas of work and investment, whether we are staying true to all of the audiences and communities which we are here to serve, right? So it helps us understand the strategy. It helps us understand the programs, right? Whether we are investing in the right programs, whether we are creating the right partnerships, whether our efforts are working or not. And more importantly, why are they working or not working? Where there may be opportunities that we haven't thought about. It also going to help us internally. This part is critical. We haven't done a whole lot of this as an organization, right? But we want to start understanding and optimizing and improving our internal operations and investment, understanding, are we dedicating the right resources and efforts to the right things? Do we have the right personnel? Are we allocating the right internal budgets to the right tools that enable the team to do the great job that they do at larger scale, right? What parts are driving more or less of the portion of impact that we want to see, right? There's always going to be some areas where, we're investing 20% of our efforts, but they're actually driving 80% of the results. We want to identify those and focus on those, right? So that's in terms of the operations. We're going to talk a lot about financials later on. Oh,
Excuse me.
no worries. We're going to talk a lot about our financials, but a good impact measurement framework is going to feed all the information into our financials and especially allow us to get proactive in this area and thoughtful about what might happen if we invest here, or if we move finances here, if we make these decisions. And then lastly, and just as importantly as the rest of it, we talked about is storytelling. How do we tell our story of impact to our stakeholders, partners, most importantly, to the public? Questions about this? Is there anything that anybody in the room thinks a good impact measurement strategy can help us do in addition to all these things that hasn't been mentioned? Okay, cool. This is all about moving from where we are today to essentially becoming a grown-up organization. Where we are today is a good place. You know, we have a really strong team that has been doing tremendous work. We have incredible partnerships with strong organizations. We can improve on that. We are spending a lot of time collecting a lot of different pieces of data together. We're spending a lot of time collecting a lot of different reports and reviewing those reports in a very manual way. We're spending a lot of time counting and talking about activities rather than impact, right? We're working very hard. Everybody's working really, really hard. We're not always stopping and thinking about where are the areas where we need to work a little bit smarter and identify those areas, right? And in our storytelling and in our reflection of impact to the world, we're spending a lot of time telling anecdotal stories. They are meaningful. They are meaningful. They're really important, but they don't scale. They don't allow us to tell the story of the breadth and impact of our organization as a whole. And that's what we want to transition to. We want to transition from collecting a lot of data to collecting the meaningful data, the stuff that actually helps us make decisions. We want to transition from focusing on collecting reports to sharing insights, understanding insights, and then sharing those back with our partners, with communities, those types of things. We want to transition from counting activities to focusing on impact. Nobody cares about how many people showed up to this event or that event. What happened afterwards, right? That improved people's lives. That's the stuff that actually matters. And we want to bring that to the surface. We want to start thinking about what are the ways in which we can work more effectively. And we want to then reflect those through stories of impact. So that's where we are. That's where we want to transition to.
I have a thought on that last slide that you were in, the from and to, it seems like if those five things are all focusing on data. I think one thing that I feel like is missing has to do with the kind of relationships that we've had and the kind of relationship we want to have.
Yeah, so I think that's a good point. The insight, the information, the data is going to tell us which relationships have been impactful from a results perspective.
Again, I think it's about relationships. So I just think that needs to be,
Yeah.
this is all about how they report, what they're reporting. But I think it's, we get, let's say 100 applications, get funded 50 of them. But in the future, we're going to really be the ones that are driving those asks. So I just think this kind of relationship we've had and the kind of relationships that we're going to be fostering or promoting or seeking or.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I understood.
And I think it's also has to do with our social return on the investment.
Mhm.
Not only did we perform these programs, offer these services, I'm thinking of, you just mentioned food distribution. What have we really done about food insecurity in the valley? Have we made an impact?
Yep. So all of those components, and that's what you both raised really good points. Every impact measurement framework will include inherently, and we'll see this later down the line, a combination of quantitative and qualitative components. And that's where the relationships may come in. For example, right? That's where understanding what's happening right now, but what is coming down the pipeline and may happen in 5 years in terms of food insecurity, for example, what trends are we seeing, can come in today and help us make smarter decisions. So it's always going to be, to your point, a combination of quantitative and qualitative components coming together. Okay.
Yeah, the county activities, you stated that how many people are showing up to an event? Well, in some of our events that we have, like the women's wellness clinics, we have women that showed up for an event, but also received a mammogram. So, or received a pair of glasses, then are now, changing the way that they're able to learn, work, etc. So I would say counting those activities, I would say could also, or the impact could also be on this side, on the front too, because that's a huge impact for a woman that's receiving a mammogram pap smear, or a child that's getting a vaccine, or a child that's getting a sports physical, etc. So the impact's already starting from the get-go. What's the next step?
So we'll dive into those types of things. But just to give you an example of what a good impact measurement framework will do for you when you're talking about something like that, it will separate between one measurement, which is an activity metric, which is the number of people who showed up. And another metric could be how many people have received early care and therefore advanced in their treatment through early detection that would otherwise not have been detected if they had not shown up. Those are two separate metrics. We can measure both. It's not either or, right? It's really important to remember there's no, magic bullet metric. It's not either or. It's really about understanding what it is that you want to measure and how do you want to use that measurement in a meaningful way. Both are important.
I just wanted to add also, they're both important because if you have a certain number of people showing up but they don't get the mammogram, that's also information that can be used to inform the next event, right? So why are we not translating it from just showing up to actually getting that care? Was it not enough appointments? Was it, the time of the day? So to your point, it also informs.
That's a great point. If you're doing it at 8 o'clock in the morning, guess what? You're missing out on an entire population of working mothers.
I like how you're teaching us these kinds of things, because to get back to Dr. Director Rogers with the food insecurity, it's almost like we're never going to solve food insecurity. It's going to be around forever. But way back when we invested millions and millions of dollars in what we called Project Produce, where we were giving dollars to find food bank to deliver free to all the 100 pantries fresh produce instead of crappy food. What we probably should have done is, after that 4-year period, is really to measure the impact of, did the people maybe not get healthy, but did they change their lifestyles by some kind of service? And we kind of stopped it there, where we just funded where it's healthy food, but we didn't go maybe that one step further, that how would you measure what impact that healthy food had on the residents that are still going to stand on a food line.
You're exactly right. Right. So in that example, a good activity metric would be how many families have we served food to that would otherwise not have food.
If you're talking
Right.
to food and medicine future type
Right.
of,
An impact metric can be how many fewer doctor visits do we see in the year following in families that we served food to versus families that we didn't. Because we were able to reduce the number of doctor visits that kids would go to because of issues that have developed due to malnutrition. And that has obviously health repercussions, has cost repercussions for those families. So we can quantify those things and actual money saved for those families. Now, those are impact metrics. That's a great example. We'll keep that in mind with the food insecurity. It's a major issue. All right, I'm going to move on
It's
to.
not just food insecurity. Donna was around and we had, with the Clinton Foundation, we had a healthy school program.
oh, yeah.
And we actually
Generation.
measured weight loss and health status of children.
Evaluated.
And you evaluated it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great example of the important work that the district has done.
Okay.
which maybe we can revisit.
So where are we today? We have the RBA framework that we adopted, what, 2 years, a year and a half ago?
More than that.
More than that.
4.
You're already ahead of a lot of other organizations in having this, right? You have a framework. You've already done a lot of work. The team has already done a really significant amount of work in taking what they had before and fitting it into a much stronger, tighter, quantitative representation or measurable representation of both activities and impact. We don't want, and we're not suggesting to throw that away. It's a great foundation. What we want to do is evolve it to the next level, right? Right now, the RBA is still, we are still finding areas where we're mixing different types of metrics. So for example, primary metrics, secondary metrics, lagging and leading indicators. We're seeing a lot of mixtures of activities versus impact, right? Those types of things. We want to create a much simpler, more streamlined taxonomy structure of how we want to measure things and align it, most importantly, align it to your new strategy. Focus it on the things that we have decided as an organization between staff, board, public. We've done so much work in better understanding what people need. Now we need to align a measurement system that can actually serve that. That goes from piecemeal kind of to a very systematic approach. These are the pillars that we've decided on. These are the goals. These are the initiatives that we're focusing on, and we can measure them in consistent ways that allow us to tell a story of progress over time. We want to be able to say, over the past 3 years, we have been able to make a dent here or an improvement there. So we need to measure these things consistently with the same important metrics over time. We're not going to dive into what those metrics are today, but it's really important to understand that consistency of measurement really, really matters. Really matters. So that's where we are today. That's where we've evolved. What does that evolution look like? If you Google impact measurement framework, you will find thousands of different approaches, different structures, different ways. The important thing for us as we're thinking about the one that we believe will make sense and serve the organization, not just today, not just in the next 5 years, but with that 20-year view, is something that is simple, that we can actually adopt, right? Something that aligns to our new strategy, that aligns to the things that we are deciding are most important for us as an organization, and something that can evolve and grow over time. Why? Because our reality is going to inevitably change around us, right? We're going to get more information from a new partner. A crisis may arise, right? I don't know, something may happen and it's going to force us to focus on a new initiative, right, that we didn't think about. So it needs to have some level of flexibility. The way in which we thought about it, you'll see on the left-hand side, this is the structure of our strategy that we all agreed to yesterday, right? We have 4 pillars. We have however many goals under that. I forget the number. We have the initiatives, and then under that, we have the tactics, right? That's the structure. That's the taxonomy of our strategy moving forward. We want to align that with an easy way to understand and separate the important metrics from the things that we really need to know, but may not necessarily serve us to make big strategic decisions. They may still serve us to make tactical decisions at the initiative level, at the tactic level, but they may not necessarily serve us if we are standing up on stage and telling our story to the world, right? So we are suggesting segmenting metrics, the 3 types of metrics. The first one is primary impact metrics. Those represent the big strategic change that we want to see and are making in the world. That aligns to the pillars, right? The big decisions, these are definitely going to be public. This is the stuff that we want to talk about on podiums. This is the stuff that we're going to want on our website. This is stuff that we're going to be really, really proud of, right? And we're going to, this is where Will's, mechanism of communication is going to come in. And this is going to be the fodder to feed Will's operation and tell great stories about our impact, right? There are going to be few of those. So if we have 4 pillars, we want no more than, 6 to 8 of these big, meaningful metrics. Why? Because people can't remember more than that. And guess what? If they can't remember it, it's very hard to create a consistent story of success. So we want the few that really, really are memorable and meaningful. Then it goes deeper from there, right? So as we advance towards the deeper levels of goals and initiatives, that's where we start weaving in secondary impact metrics. There are more of them per goal or per initiative, just as there are more goals and initiatives, the deeper down we go into our taxonomy and structure of our strategy that we approve, right? Some of those are going to be public, some of those are not going to be public. It's really going to be up to us as an organization to decide which ones and how we want to tell those stories, but there's more flexibility, right? And then we're going to dive into our activity metrics. Remember, big difference between impact metrics and activity metrics. Activity metrics are operational. They tell us whether we're doing a good job, whether efficiency is there, whether we have identified the right partnerships, all those types of questions, right? There can be as many of those as we want, depending on the complexity of a specific tactic or initiative a tactic that we want to execute in our designing. They are rarely public because we don't need to tell the public, oh, we have a 30% efficiency on this employee and a 35% efficiency on that employee, right? That's for us to know, for the staff mostly to know. This is a structure, we think it's a much simpler, streamlined structure that aligns to your strategy and that allows you to evolve and has the flexibility that you need over time, especially as you dive deeper into the taxonomy, into activities and initiatives and the tactics that actually allow you to execute those. I'm going to pause here. Any questions on this?
Do you have that as a handout or?
I certainly can. I don't have it here, but we can certainly send it to you afterwards.
The activity metrics, those are the ones that staff is going to be the ones that are dealing with that?
Correct. The activity metrics, yeah. So naturally, as you dive deeper into the taxonomy, it gets more tactical. In an ideal world, the people who are going to be dealing with the activity metrics are the program officers. You have to invest as an organization in getting program officers and your data team. You have to invest in getting a good data team together. In an ideal world, those are the people who are going to be going around with the activity metrics and tell us, hey, last year we invested in partnerships with 2 different organizations that dealt with food insecurity. These guys got $1 million and these guys got $1 million. Based on the metrics that we are seeing, and we're measuring across 20 metrics, these guys are giving us X return on investment or social return on investment. And these guys are giving us 2X. What do we do with that information? It's up to us. I would strongly advise to consider reinvesting some of the funds in the one that's given us 2X, because we have a primary responsibility to the people of Coachella Valley. And if they are driving 2 times the impact that we want to see, that the residents of the city, of the valley have told us that that's what matters to them, and it is our responsibility to reallocate that. Other questions?
It also can help the discussion around the spotlight communities that we're having, we're having that discussion. So how is it affecting in different groups and different geographies? So it's another way that we can look at this data.
This is a big shift. It aligns with the big shift that we made yesterday. Yesterday was absolutely monumental for this organization in adopting not just a new strategy, but a new way of thinking. This is designed to enable that way of thinking and feed data that allows us to make smarter, more proactive decisions. The point is to move away from reactive to proactive.
I just want to add a word of reality, which is
Yeah.
this is going to happen over time. This is not a faucet that you turn on tomorrow and all of a sudden, you have the data sources and the right channels and the right tools and the right people in place. So this is, a little bit the same thing as a strategy. It gives you a true north. This is where we want to go, but we have to acknowledge we are here and it will take time. And
Yeah.
practice to get to that
Yeah.
ideal state.
So thank you for that, Sophie. So I want everybody to be, thank you, you're spot on. I think we should be excited and aspirational, but also realistic. Today, you don't have the technical tools to do this yet. You don't have the full staff to do this yet. Part of the strategy is thinking about what those are and how do we bring them in as quickly as possible. But to Sophie's point, it's not a turnkey. Staff, any questions on your end? Really, Alejandro? No questions?
No, I'm just.
I saw you take a breath. I know.
Yeah, I just look at it, some of these things, like there is a lot of external variables that I don't think a grant could address through an organization. So looking at food insecurity, right? It's, we provide the food, but what other variables are gonna impact that health of that individual that we cannot account for? So how can we realistically say that that was a change or it wasn't a change because our grant dollars were not targeting other very important variables that could change the outcome, the health outcome of that individual?
Great question. So from a mathematical perspective, there's a name to the term that you just described, which is called counterfactuals.
I'm sorry, what was it?
Counterfactuals. The things that could influence something that happened that have nothing to do with us. Yes, you're right. We're going to need to think about these things. And we're going to, as we dive into what primary impact metrics we're choosing, what secondary impact metrics and what activity metrics we are choosing for our tactics, we will need to think a lot about those things, right? And we'll need to think about if we are choosing a primary impact metric that we don't have high degree of confidence is actually, in our control, it probably shouldn't be the metric that we go with, right? It may be really great to be able to tell that story, but if, a board member or Chris stands up on stage and tells that story and somebody 2 hours later says, hold on, and does an investigative report about how that argument breaks down, that's a bad scenario for us. So we'll need to think about those things. Yeah, it's a part of the work.
So with that,
Yeah.
we're gonna have hopefully a lot of partnerships. And some of the partnerships are going to be very, very important to us in terms of how much money we invest in them and what are the return on investment that we're gonna get. There's some partnerships that I am wondering if they fit into this. I'm not sure if they become one of those that we just know that they're important, but we just cannot, we have to do this. And that is the partnerships when we know that they are doing good work, but that they need a little bit of help, a little bit of whether it's financial or convening or facilitating something that is going to be a great benefit to the community.
Yep.
That communities need each other,
So-
partners. So I'm just wondering, would we, just as an example.
How would you address something like that? Carefully. Carefully, because if you have too many of those, it becomes very unruly and very difficult to manage. If you can't measure it, it's very hard to manage. Now, I recognize and agree with you that there are intangibles that can't be quantified. How do you quantify love? Can't. Right? Philosophical conversations, but there are things that are very, very hard to quantify. But as an organization, you have a vision, mission, purpose that then translates into pillars and goals and initiatives. And unless you can show that the investment of funding or time or effort has translated to a thing that helps us demonstrate value in those initiatives and goals and pillars, what are we doing here?
So Director Joe Lammers, I just want to kind of just, as always, you're always thinking ahead, which is wonderful because it's actually part of also the financial sustainability discussion that we need to have, which is what framework can we use to evaluate every opportunity, both from a strategic perspective and the financial perspective, depending on how we define financial sustainability and return on it and social return on investment. So that's one part of the answer. And then we're also going to be talking about that in that session as well. Sorry.
Well, I'm just building on what Letty is saying in terms of, I know that in the 12 years that I've been on the board, that we have funded organizations just because they ask us for grants. I'm thinking of Pegasus is, they're a great organization. They offer a good service, but how do they fit into the big picture that we're trying to design?
Look, we're in no position to tell you how to make those decisions. Our job is to advise and give you the tools that allow you to make an informed decision. This framework will give you the tools and information and insight to do that. What does the organization then choose to do, and how does it choose to use that information? We can't tell you, right? To Director Galar's point, there are intangibles that we're not aware of, relationships, loyalties, political ramifications that may come up. Those things should be considered. We're not ignoring those. What we are saying is, what we want to do is create a framework that gives you that information so you can make the most informed and educated decision. We're in no position to tell you this organization it should get $2 million and this organization should get $5.
I think the example that I was thinking of in my head was what was brought up earlier in conversation about a previous relationship that we had with Clinton Foundation. And that is, they're doing their big thing, $100 million. And by us investing in time and maybe a little bit of money, that it allowed them to advance their
Sure.
mission and showing a community
Right.
investment. But for us, it was kind of like a short-term thing. It didn't really lead anywhere permanently. So I'm just thinking that kind of relationship was, it helped them a great deal. It didn't help us that much. Is that something that we would sacrifice in the future, or would we do it just because it advances their mission?
I don't know, but what I would advise is if you cannot show that this investment has made meaningful impact to the pillars, goals, and initiatives that we agreed to yesterday, the question that should be asked is, why are we doing this? There may be an answer.
And what are the implications? Like, when you say yes to something, you always say no to something. Like there's no magical world where you can say yes to both things and there's no consequences. And so again, the strategy is one way of evaluating those opportunities, but the financial framework will be the second.
Yeah.
That says if we make this investment, for example, same thing as if we make this investment today, what are the consequences down the road? Like, let's not, one way of thinking about it is just think about today and not think about tomorrow. But, you'll see that we're going to guide you through this way of thinking of saying, okay, if we make an investment today, what are the consequences down the road? And, and how does that affect our ability to deliver on our strategy? So it's all about it's frameworks that, you can do step by step.
The real change that we want to make, and the real change that this allows the organization to make, the staff, the board, your partners, everyone, is not to decide we're given to this organization and not given to this organization. It's to gather the right information that allows us to have a meaningful conversation and debate that isn't about emotions and subjective components that lead to nowhere, to be perfectly honest, but have an intelligent, informed discussion about these things. That's the point of a good impact measurement framework, is to not eliminate, we will never eliminate all subjectivity. We are human beings. We make emotional decisions. We're programmed that way. But to inform the decisions in as much as we possibly can. That's what a good impact measurement will allow the organization to do. And that's the switch that we all have to do in our heads. It's going to take time. It's a process, but that's what grown-up organizations do.
Are there examples of this currently in the government, whether it's local, state, national? That you could say where they do that effectively?
Yeah, of course.
So I see it in the business world all the time. You know, we have feedback mechanisms that are pretty rapid. Where you see the response, you don't get the sales, you don't get the revenue. But here, you know, how do you manage, how is it, I don't know if there's an example you can give about where the impact's measured within government, you know, and what their framework was built around. I don't know.
Yeah, I can give you an example. So we had a project with the city of Detroit, for example, and the city of Detroit and their Doug, who's very data oriented, asked us to try and understand what are the most impactful interventions that the city can undertake to reduce the likelihood of repeat offenses of individuals who have been incarcerated and have been released. In other words, how can we prevent people who have served their time and went back to society? What are the most important things that we can do, or most impactful things that we can do to make sure that they don't come back into the system, to give them the best chance to reintegrate into society in a meaningful way? So we looked at a lot of different things, right? What do you think was the number one thing that helps people not come back to jail?
Yeah. I would say moving away, or, you know, changing location, or
You're close.
yeah, it has to be with like removing whatever's causing the habit to happen. Same thing with addicts. I don't know what it is, but
It's education
Yeah.
during incarceration. If you can get a person to finish their high school degree, finish their first degree while they are incarcerated, that is the most effective thing that you can do for them. More than job training,
yeah.
Transitional.
because you're changing the way in which the individual thinks through education.
And what was your feedback mechanism? Because that seems like it would be like any clinical study. It takes years to get data back. What was the timeline for that?
So we had the luxury of looking at 5 to 7 years worth of previous data.
You had already collected data.
We had not collected the data.
So the data had been collected. So you already had a little head start where.
The data had been collected, but it was never put together. So the education data versus
Sure.
you know, that data versus repeat offense data has never been put together. So we were
Applying that to what we're doing here, what's the expectation in terms of a timeline for impact factor? Because a lot of what we're going to be working on, I think, is a perfect example, because they're topics that are really hard to measure. 2, it's very sensitive subjects. 3, it's a long time to see the change. So I guess I was looking, and you did it perfectly, was just kind of set the stage for what our expectation is on this impact factor, you know? And then how do you break that down into short measurable goals? You'd like to know in 2 years instead of 7 years. And we have, same thing with clinical trials. We have times we get off the ramp and say, no, it's not working. We see problems, or it's working so well, we may want to take the risk and expedite this treatment because it's been highly effective.
So it depends on 3 things. We're getting real
Oh,
deep
sorry.
here, but that's fine. It depends on 3 things.
Maybe you'll go into it. I just wanted to make sure we
No,
had
we're
that
not going
discussion.
to.
Okay.
But it depends on 3 things. 1, what is the objective function? What are you trying to solve, right? What is the change that you want to see? So that's 1. 2, how long does it take for that change to happen, right? So I don't know. Some changes take years, decades, right? The city of New York is still feeling ramifications of poverty today among specific populations from zoning codes that were created in the 40s and 50s,
Sure.
right? So these things echo through time. And then the third thing is what metrics are you collecting and how quickly those numbers change. Right? So if you're using annual health data, well, guess what? It's going to take a couple of years to understand meaningfully whether that change is happening. Right? If we're counting the number of, go back to food insecurity, the number of kids, and assuming that we are managing the counterfactuals,
For sure.
kids who, because they have received better nutrition, have dropped, we are seeing a meaningful reduction in their visitation to pediatric specialists. We could see that in a couple of months. Now, we need to account for the counterfactual, other things that could happen,
For sure, obviously.
but it really depends on the metric, what it is that we are defining as the change that we want to see. Yeah.
I can kind of give you a really good example, Coachella Valley wide. 10, 15 years ago, the
Mhm.
Regional Medical Center closed the inpatient psych ward
Okay.
and the intensive outpatient therapy. I see that has caused this mental health crisis here in Coachella. Now, by slowly, there's more beds coming in, there's the hospital in Indio. San Gorgonio has a really intensive outpatient treatment center here in Palm Springs, but they had to come from outside to do it, so.
Yeah.
It was a huge cause and effect.
Let me give you an example from Sunday. The TSA was not getting paid. How long do you think my line was at TSA?
Which airport? Just get updated.
Good question.
JFK.
Yeah,
Immediate cause and effect.
that's very quick though. I think what we're.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about number of new clinicians.
Exactly. So there are other things.
Long term.
So government also cut funding for cancer research.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you
You're
won't see
very
it now,
familiar.
but you'll see it down the road. There's no drugs
Exactly.
coming
You're
out.
not going to see it now in the next 2 years. You're going to see it come down the road. It's going to take a while, but it's going to hurt.
But the point is also to set yourself up to start tracking.
Well,
You know what I'm
so
saying?
that's my final point was
Yeah.
back to data, because I like data is like, you can make these decisions because you are collecting this data. And right now, I mean, we have some data partners, but I think in order to really measure this impact factor, we really got to focus back on this structure of how we're bringing in data. Because if you don't have that, you can never do it. I can't remember very well. Yeah.
So you missed that first part.
Good.
All of this has to align to the strategy structure that we decided on yesterday. And two,
David
the
Moore.
resources, tools, people that we need to bring in to enable.
And I would add that from the community sessions, Dr. Lawson, we also saw there are a lot of partners who are collecting data. So one of the steps is also analyzing what's available
Mhm.
across.
Yep.
Across the district.
And you hope
Right.
it's
And
there
have-
so that you can measure for the last 5 or 7 years.
Exactly.
Somebody's been collecting it.
Right, and be the convener.
Yep.
That's what this, and be the amplifier. So that is definitely another step.
I just corrected you so that the public doesn't think that we met yesterday because we didn't meet yesterday.
Oh, sorry, the day before. All the group.
He's got
I'm in California time. It's all a blur to me.
Oh, good.
We talk a lot about what makes a good metric. We started talking about that now. Here, they're usually specific, measurable, available. We can actually get our hands on them, reliable. I left timely open there because we don't know what the timeframes are that we need,
No.
right? We don't know that yet. So that's why that's like still ambiguous. But we know that we need to give time parameters to these and insightful. This is the most important thing. It helps us make smart decisions. We talked about that previously. If we're just collecting data for the sake of collecting data, it's a waste of time, resources, money, effort, everything. Unless it helps us make a smarter decision, it's useless. It's in fact a distraction.
I mean, except the example you gave in Detroit, had they not collected that data, you wouldn't have known.
So
They might have called it useless. What are we doing with it? And it just turned out, well, some mayor or whoever's like, now do we have the data? Like, actually, we do, we've been collecting it. Steve over here has been collecting it for 7 years. We didn't know what to do with it. That's how it happens in clinical trials all the time. They're doing it with the weight loss drugs. They're like, well, actually, we're seeing a benefit in heart conditions. You're like, how'd you know that? Well, they followed everything. So it's just one of those things. It's like what to include, what doesn't, not to exclude. So anyways, I'm just saying, we want to be broad scoped and eventually narrow, but I think the more you have, yes, it can be a problem to manage it, but you don't know what's gonna stand out. Nobody here would have guessed that education in incarceration would have led to that. I don't think.
A fair point, but there needs to be a balance there. Right?
Correct.
Because we are not a research organization.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's bake that into the 2030, 2035 strategy.
We have a whole pillar on data.
I know.
I mean, it is the second, but it is the second phase of being the providers of data for the community. Yeah.
All right,
We're
let's
gonna
move
get
on.
our house in order.
Um,
Oh, sorry.
so, no, we want to go back.
Think we're.
So this is where we are today, right? So don't hold us accountable to the number of metrics. This is just as an example, right? But broadly speaking, at the pillar level, like we talked about earlier, we want few metrics that tell a big story of success that actually matters to our most important stakeholders. Why? Because attention spans are short, because it's really hard to keep people focused, because we want to be known for specific things that actually matter, right? So at the primary level of impact metrics, we probably want very few. As we dive deeper into the goals and initiatives, we can add to it. As we dive even deeper into the activities themselves, it becomes a very, very big, can become a very big bucket of things that we want to collect, to your earlier point, that allow us to understand efficiencies, potentially discover new things, all those types of things. But that's at the metric, at the activity and initiative. But this is the suggested taxonomy. Notice it aligns perfectly well to the structure that we agreed to yesterday. Monday. Monday. 4 pillars. For each one, we have 2 or 3 goals. For each one, we have 4 to 6 initiatives. These are the major things that we want to do as an organization. This is the change that we want to see in the world, in our world. All right, next. What could this look like? Again, I'm not going to bore you too much with the details, but this is illustrative. These aren't necessarily the metrics that will end on, but just to give you an idea. So at the pillar level, as you can see, very few, I think there's 6 to 7 metrics there that we say, these are the things that really matter to us. Under that, under workforce, we have one of our 2 goals is recruitment. So we're going to say in recruitment at the goal level, this is the metric that we want to focus on. This is the definition. This is why it matters. This Excel sheet continues to things like how do we gather it? How often do we gather it? How much trust do we have? What kind of factuals? All those things. And then it goes into the initiative. This can obviously also go into the activity level, but that's at the staff. That's where we need really good program officers to come in, experts in their field, and tell us, these are the things that if we want to tackle food insecurity, this is where we need to focus. If we want to tackle workforce, which we know is a major, major issue here, these are the things that we need to look at a tactical level.
I see so many similarities between this and results-based accountability.
What did I say at the beginning? We're not looking to reinvent the wheel. We're looking to evolve. We're looking to improve. You're in a good place already. You're well ahead of a lot of other organizations already. We're looking to evolve in a way that allows us more focus on the things that we have decided are really important to the people here, and flexibility because life happens.
Yeah.
It evolves. So this is what this will look like. It's in an Excel sheet now because you don't have a data management system. Guess what? That's another one of those things that you're going to need to invest in.
And again, just to reiterate, this is the content of the work that we'll be doing with the staff.
Yeah. We're going to dive deep with the staff and start thinking about what these are. Next steps. To that exact point. Review and finalize the taxonomy, the structure. This is what we're doing here. I want to know if you guys have any questions. I want to know if there's anything that doesn't make sense, because this is a really important derivative of the decision that we made 2 days ago, right? This needs to follow through from the strategy. Then we're going to be working with the staff to start thinking about what are the right metrics at the highest level and then going down the taxonomy.
Are we appropriately staffed from expert level to even decide on certain metrics or something? I mean, we run on a very lean staff. All of them wear multiple hats every day. I just worry about, are we even ready to begin? Not that our current staff is not capable, they are, but they are already all managing full-time jobs. This is a big ask of a current staff. I don't know what Chris's thoughts. I'd love to have feedback.
Yeah.
No, I mean, we're gonna have to expand staff. I mean,
It takes time to hire
Probably-
people. And I mean, are you guys
We're probably
part of that
5 to
process
10
with us? Hey, we want to identify people
We would love to do
in
that.
that space. I don't know if that's something we've already thought about, because I'm seeing this and I'm like, we can't currently, I don't think, meet these.
I
Right.
think that was something that we talked about at the last meeting.
Yeah.
They're already starting to identify some of the
We
positions.
might need help with. Would you agree
Mm-hmm.
that we would need help with
Yeah.
even finding how to even put a job description together, and where to even begin looking? Because the valley's great, but we also have limited access to.
and I think that that's part of a continuing chapter that we would like to engage with someone.
Yeah.
That they can work with us on those types of things. We are already starting to look at like
And we've al-
a chart and.
We've already we are big believers in not giving you the strategy and being like, go forth and have fun, right? So we have, for example, given Chris and the staff a proposed like org chart saying this is very much a draft, but if, in reality, this is what it looks like, right? So you would need program directors or experts in the pillars, and you need to hire and you need to, onboard those people. So yeah, we have started those discussions, but it's
Massive
definitely.
expansion though. I mean, what you're
Yeah.
talking about undertaking is not a staff of 12. It's probably at least.
Yeah.
double it.
We're talking
So I'd
probably
like-
close to 20.
It's
Yeah.
a minimum. I mean, you think
Yeah.
about it. If you even have a statistician or two available to do some of this work and some epidemiology, what you're collecting is.
So look, that, I would suggest doing it gradually, right? We don't
Of
want the
course.
body to reject the organ. So we'll need to think about that, and honestly, that's up to you guys to decide. We'd be happy to continue supporting that. I would say that we always look at 5 parameters of an organization, right? People, process, tools, knowledge, and culture. Those are the kind of ways in which we examine the health, like whether it's an effective organization. There are missing pieces in all of those.
I think what Dr. Longston, Director Longston is saying though, is that the implementation, that we know that there's going to be a work that's needed. When you're done here, when we adopt this in July, you're still gonna continue to be helping to implement, right? That's what
I
I'm
don't know if we
guessing.
have that established
If
yet.
you want us to do that.
That's up to you. We'll be bringing back.
That's why I brought it up.
Right, not in the current.
That's why I brought it up now, because I thought when you talk about next steps and I look at it, I think there's a lot of things that should be filled in under 1, 2, and 3. That
Yes.
we're currently not ready anywhere close to begin implementing or even I mean, just the hiring process alone
Yes.
could take a year or 2. to find. So anyways, I just thought it would be a right time to talk about next steps being how we continue this in our current staffing model.
Right, and that's exactly right. I mean, the current scope of work is to complete a strategic plan. And then I'm believing that will be a consensus of the board and we're gonna work on putting together a scope of work for continuing to implement the plan.
Is that something you
that's-
guys would
Bring that.
vote for us is saying, hey, look, now that we brought it up here, is that something we could request from them to say, hey, if it looked like we wanted to continue something going forward to help with this, is that, could you bring a proposal to us that we could review like?
That's what I'm saying is we're working right now to develop a scope of work that we would bring to the board in May, the finance committee first, to continue to help us implement the
And the way we're looking at it is, so what we shared with the staff at the beginning of the week is just like Ori said, like from a process perspective, from a data perspective, from a people perspective, what are the next steps that you should consider?
That aligns with what your capabilities are, because I mean, when we evaluated you, it was for what you've already done with us, but the next step is more of an execution implementation. But
So
you-
with the implementation plan, have that information, like this is what an organization like ours can help with,
Yes.
right? Because at the end,
That's what
like.
that's what I did. That's what-
100%.
Be
And-
part of that.
Exactly.
Yes, and the other two things that I would add to it. What is the right sequence? Or what do we think is the right sequence? Because that's super important. You're not going to be able to do all of it in one go. And two, what are the things that we can't do?
Right.
We're going to be honest about that. If you are looking for
That's what I was
an
asking.
impact measurement, data management platform, we don't build data management platforms. We work with a lot of companies who have really strong data management platforms that we can recommend and make those connections and even help you
Yep.
put together an RFP and help with the process of selection. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But we're not a technology shop.
That's what I was asking. Where do you begin to pass the baton and to whom? And what does that look like? And how far can you carry it and in what direction?
Yeah.
So,
And that will be very clear.
okay, good.
And I can tell you, we're not a build shop.
Yeah, of course.
We used to do that. We're
Leave it
better
to the
at this.
builders. Yeah, leave it to there's.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
So what would the timeline look like? Cause are we gonna put on pause our grants until we have this pause? What does the timeline look like? Cause it's, as we're building this, we obviously want to implement these measurement metrics as we start awarding some of these grants. So what does that timeline look like of us awarding, measuring, and implementing all of this to ensure that we, right off the bat, have, these metrics embedded within all these grants?
Some of these things you're going to be able to implement in terms of a better approach or a better methodology pretty quickly. But to answer that question, that's exactly what we're going to be working with you guys over the next few weeks, is to understand, what does that look like? What can we change in the short term? What are changes that will happen short term? I'm thinking, we usually think of short term 0 to 6 months. Anything beyond that to a year and a half is medium term, and anything beyond a year and a half is long term. So yeah, we're going to work on what are the things that fit into which one of those time horizons, so we can start thinking about, how does this change happen? The most important thing to understand is it won't happen switch. It just doesn't happen that way, right? So it will take some time, but there are some things. For example, if we're thinking about a new grants management platform, guess what? That's something that can happen in 2 months. It's not complicated. There are plenty of grants management platforms out there. They're out of the box. They will work with you to create modifications and tailor it to your specific needs. And then they'll bring an excellent account manager who will help and hold your hand through the implementation and will be there to offer suggestions on what else you should be doing that you're not thinking of.
But I think what you brought is a good point. You're now running 2 parallel processes.
Yes.
You cannot stop what we're currently doing, and you have to continue. You're going to keep the strategic plan. So you have to do both. And it's over time, things are going to begin to mix in. But the stress that comes running 2 parallel paths while maintaining the quality and excellence that you currently already have is going to be very challenging. That's why I paused here and said, look, we really have to think about that. And your timeline is going to be very extended, because I think you said it, like, you want to make sure you're gently bringing all of these pieces in. This isn't something that's going to even happen by the end of my term. This isn't going to happen for the next 10 years. You're slowly going to be bringing this in. And that's why understanding that from a staffing perspective, we're maxed now with what you guys are currently doing. And to ask you to run a parallel process it's not feasible.
I do want to say though, Alejandro, that it is important. We discussed this a little bit with the team. There is going to be it might be beneficial to take a pause, not a long pause, but you are adopting a new strategic plan. You have paused rolling grants for the moment, right? It wouldn't probably be prudent you have to announce that strategic plan. We all have to agree on that, how it's going to be implemented in terms of rolling grants and RFPs, right? You usually go dark in August, I think, right? So people are not going to be reviewing things in July when everybody's gone in August. So it might make sense to give yourselves the time to say, okay, we're going to start looking for the right staff, right? We're going to start the hiring process. We're going to start evaluating the technology that we have, and really set yourselves up for success to start open doors in September. So I just want to make sure also that might be a possibility to consider, so that you're not, you're moving away from that reactive mode of like, let's take a pause. It's a big change. We're adopting a new plan. This is what it's going to look like. Make sure the community knows about it, right? That you guys are set up for success. To your point, there's many steps, but as a first step, I would encourage that to be considered.
And even if it's not September, right, even if it's not just 2 months, even if it's, let's say, 6 months before we
Yeah.
open it up, I think as long as we really think about
Uh-huh.
the design and if it's gonna work, right, we're not just gonna open something up or open our grants just because we feel
Right.
rushed, right? No, I think that it would kind of be a disservice to all the work that we're doing now. to do that. Exactly.
Exactly. The most important things from this session to remember are, we're aligning to the new strategy. We are looking to transition mostly from reactive work and ways of thinking to proactive and insight-driven decisions. And we now have a framework that aligns to all that. And as it grows and as it evolves and as we amass the tools and the people and the skill sets and processes and capabilities, it will help us transition into that. It will also require some discipline, and it will also require some tough decisions. And it's important that we're honest about.
But
yes.
you'll have the frameworks for those decisions to be made.
As say, if we have to find like timeline to President Barraza's thought. We really need to build a really strong community engagement plan to explain this to the community, because they're figuring July 1st, boom, we've got $5 million again for grants. Let's start. Where's the application? Right, so we have to really get into the community as well, and let them help agree what we're doing.
Definitely.
Okay, buy into it.
Okay.
Well, I think another piece that's yet to come is we have to figure out how to utilize the resources. So are we going to be looking at increasing that budget to a certain number per year for programs, for facilities, et cetera? I mean, so all of those things need to be, defined in the process, especially as we're developing budget now. The budget that we're working on now may not be, a great budget because we don't know all the pieces that we're going to look at. So I say that because we're just going to be, in essence, kind of guessing some numbers as we develop this new budget going into next year. Because just for what we're talking about now, we may have some development time before we're actually implementing a lot of grant funding, et cetera. So just something for us to keep in mind is
The timeline of what that looks like is important too, because with the staffing costs and changes we've been making, some of the funds may be directed toward that initially. So,
Yeah.
go ahead, sorry, buddy. I didn't mean to cut you off. You put your hand up. I didn't.
Okay, I just wanted to say that it may actually not be possible to do a budget right now. It will be a budget that will be adopted, but realistically, in 6 months, we may have to do a request.
Exactly.
Because we have the lease, is it gonna go through? Are we gonna get the first installment or not? So that's gonna probably happen in 2027 if all goes well. So, we're really looking at as what we know today or what we can anticipate today. And then probably in January, revising it based if we do have like a 6 months or 9 months, whatever it turned out to be, a period of transition and then having to do a revised budget.
Well, I don't think we could have had a better transition to the next section. So can I ask if anybody needs a break? Because, there are two different, they're connected conversations, but this is like, we're asking everybody to shift their brain towards finance. So does everybody feel good? Everybody complete with
There'll be
the
a time
measure?
for public comment.
Okay, we'll announce that towards the end.
Okay, so now the 6.
Okay, we're good to go? All right. So we are going to, just as we have had great strategic discussions about what framework can guide our work, and now we just had an impact measurement framework about what impact framework we need to have to make the strategy a possibility and any of our goals. What do we need to do financially? What kind of financial framework do we need to support this plan? And that is the discussion we're going to begin today. And I'm going to hand it to Billy, who's on screen. Over to you, Billy. You're on mute.
Thank you, Sophie. Can everyone hear me now?
Yes.
Hi, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. The first disclosure is I have a 15-month-old on the opposite side of this wall. So if I end up calling in from the driveway, it's because I woke him up and I am in trouble. So I apologize if so I'm gonna try and keep my voice as low as possible. But the key thing number one is I heard so many kind of incredibly astute observations that tie back directly into this in terms of I heard Director Delara pointing out the fact that there's just functionally it's impossible to create a budget that is rigid and locked in given all of the strategic fluctuations that we're experiencing, but then simultaneously I heard Dr. Logston pointing out the fact that there's a lot of change management going on. It needs to be accounted for in the budget, and it needs to I would even add the second component, which is that given the contextual reality, which is you're about to have a massive influx of funds in the short term, that also represents a massive additional workload, just processing and reviewing and being able to link all of those things. So, and then Director Rodriguez yesterday made an incredible connection to sort of leveraging additional sources of revenue as a means of maximizing the funds available to the district in the long term. So this is really about kind of holding space for all of that, but also holding space for the massive amount of fluctuations and the many variables that are likely to change given context, some of which can be predicted, some of which absolutely can't be predicted. And so we're trying to right now, if we could just go to the first slide, really we're just trying to align the first objective is to align on our kind of financial sustainability objectives and review and discuss high level kind of fund allocation and principles and review some hypothetical, and again I want to underscore hypothetical scenarios, and present a financial sustainability framework that we can all again kind of level set on, and hopefully be able to come to a consensus. But most importantly, I really would love for this whole session to serve as a discussion, an opportunity for us to discern from you your perspectives on sustainability while you have these massive decisions that you have to make and that ultimately you're going to be responsive to the community for. So if we could go to the next slide. So yeah, just recapping back to what we have done in the past, which is we started out with a goal of community centricity, recognizing the importance of the fact that we are responsive to the community and recognizing that you're creating this very dynamic strategic plan, but also that it needs to be able to exist in the long term. It would be an enormous shame if the resources and the momentum that is generated from this strategy and subsequent strategies is not positioned to last in the long term. But within that, there are many discussions to have. And then most importantly, along all this is that it's legally compliant. There are countless parameters that we've discovered you have to follow and abide by. And I'm very grateful that your board representation includes a lawyer, because we need to have a sort of a risk assessment lens through which we view this because of the sustainability threats that come from those compliance requirements. Okay, so let's see. So the key thing is, what did we do in over the period of the past engagement? Well, we really engaged in a multi-pronged set of discussions, set of reviews, and that started with the preliminary discovery report and also ongoing discussions with the incredible staff. We also spoke with external stakeholders in the form of the Association of California Health Districts, who gave us an incredible amount of input. We compared to peer organizations and also within the health district community, but also thinking even externally to that, to benchmarking against other foundations and other social impact oriented organizations. And arguably most importantly, we also spoke with legal counsel to understand the various compliance requirements, the various parameters under which your funds operate and exist and are regulated. And just to double back, we see that you have this incredible strategic plan. It's that has really sort of come together in a way that has these four pillars and these dual high-level purposes of establishing a backbone healthcare amplifier and also identifying these two absolutely essential priorities, recognizing the fact that within that there are countless needs, and the impact measurement work that Ori is leading is going to help to be able to discern both what are viable opportunities and also how well are they actually playing out. And the finance piece is also going to allow us to ask the question of to what extent are we able to maximize either a return on investment or a social return on investment, ideally both in many cases, but we're trying to sort of have a dual lens in that regard. So here's the real top line. One of the core findings that, and again, I would love everyone's impressions on, is that we took a look at the totality of revenues that could theoretically be used and deployed for purposes of achieving the impact that the district wants to have with its community, in partnership with its community. And we really kind of came down to this clear dividing line, which is all revenues that derive from tax originally, be it the lease revenue, be it reserve accounts where the principal that was put in originated from tax revenue or tax revenue itself. All of that is treated as identical in terms of the regulatory regime it falls under. It is the same level of flexibility is afforded across those three, so that both simplifies our options, but it also limits the level of flexibility. Yes, Director Logston.
Where would you put in revenues generated from real estate holdings that aren't lease revenue? So, we own a medical complex now. How does that revenue factor in?
Well, that's all owned by the district with tax dollars.
So that was actually acquired with tax dollars.
Yes, so that anything that I will call under the district would be guided by the tax dollars. So like say if we build future or own future facilities, they would be done like with the tax dollars. So those would be assets of the district and would have the return on investment related to that as well.
Does that limit how that revenue can be spent going forward because it was identified as a tax related purchase originally?
It still would have to be under the district guidelines. So we couldn't say, and we have to live within the boundaries also of the lease agreement. So we can't just go buy properties, say downtown Palm Springs, to have as a new medical office building, or in La Quinta as a new medical office building, because it doesn't comply with the lease non-compete of the lease agreement. We can in those designated areas outside.
Underserved areas.
Yeah, those underserved areas that have been specifically identified. And I don't know if I got off base from your question or not.
I think you can also put a caveat in there is that the lessee tenant may agree to an investment by us if they see
If
that.
they gave the okay to it.
They gave the
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
or that matches their strategic plan, like a medical office building across the street from the hospital would be very advantageous.
Yeah,
Another
Correct.
one.
They would have to give us a little variance on the
They would
lease.
have to do that.
correct.
That's fine.
So not impossible, but it is a layer of scrutiny that would happen, basically. But yes, that exactly as you said, Chris and Director Rogers and Director Logston, is the idea that flexibility is not impossible, but it is regulated, and therefore it's just something that we're going to have to filter everything through that. Unlike the non-tax revenue which you receive, inclusive of donations, bequests, matching grants through partnerships, or if, let's say, you received a foundation donation where they didn't add any restrictions to it, that tranche of funds would clearly be less regulated than those derived from taxes. But clearly, right now, that is a very small percentage of the budget. Though it is, and I know it's a priority to find a way to grow that or build partnerships, and that's a key element of the strategic plan moving forward. So we can go to the next slide. So here's the key thing, is that amid all of that, and this has sort of been the subtext of the discussion in a lot of cases, is that we have this very significant financial development happening in the near term. And when it's funny, when we were looking at this graph originally, it was unclear because people thought that either side of on 1 or 31 were actually just borders because they were so asymmetric with the rest of the numbers, because the $100 million sandwiching funds are so substantial. But that also sort of illustrates the very significant decision that you have to make, and the implications of what to do with that $100 million. The idea that you have a very significant starting point, and then a steady and gradually increasing subsequent set of funds that ultimately will cease after 20 years, and then for a 10-year period completely cease, and then again an end payment of $100 million. So that this relatively jagged, it's kind of it vacillates between jagged and stable at the same time, but it certainly presents a set of decisions to ensure that you're able to sustain the impact that you want to have well beyond the lease term. And a lot of that is going to have to be a reflection of the board's priorities, the board's interpretation of sustainability, and what that looks like. So this is the high level kind of set of discussion topics that we're going to be covering, again, in piece by piece by piece. But I wanted to kind of throw out there just the overall, where there's a logic to this discussion, which is, the first is the question of, and this is literally just one subcomponent of a subcomponent, which illustrates kind of the complexity but the importance of this process. First is just, how do we sustain the impact of the lease revenue? We don't want, the worst case scenario is that this lease revenue is simply dispersed and it exhausts, and then who knows what's going to happen in the long term with the tax revenue. And ultimately, we want to make sure that we're making the most of this incredible opportunity that you've generated for the district. So ultimately, there are many options, but let's just bucket them for discussion purposes of, you could potentially allocate a portion towards grants, and then you could allocate a portion towards reserves, which we'll sort of bucket that as funds that are looking with an eye towards sustainability. And on the left-hand side, when we talk about how do we spend the dedicated grant funds, you could theoretically spend it commensurate or proportional with the lease revenue, which would have obviously the quickest spend down. Or you could say, we want to spread this out evenly. We want to have a very stable course of our spend down, so that the community has a level of stability and clarity of understanding. And then the question is, well, how long do you want to spread that out? And then on the right-hand side, there's the question of, well, how do we want to spend these reserves towards grant making? Is this going to function as a rainy day fund, where essentially, given fluctuations in tax revenue, given potential upticks or downticks in community context, do you want to have access to resources that could be deployed at a point in time of your choosing? Could be interest-only grant giving, which would function essentially as an endowment, where you would maintain that principal, and over the long term, you would have it in perpetuity. Or you would potentially say, okay, we're going to do this in an above interest spend down, which would extend out the runway in a long term, but in reality, it would keep the funds longer because of the interest accruing aspect on the front end. So we can go to the next slide. I want to, before we even discuss anything, because this is, I really want to highlight these are discussion scenarios. I'd love to hear, to the extent that anyone is comfortable, I would love to just hear when your first impressions have, please don't take anything that I've said as a recommendation. I would really love to hear each of your perspectives just on your view, your vision for sustainability, your impression, how you define it, or just your initial thoughts on what you define as financial sustainability, and also any key priorities that you can list at this point.
Billy, can I raise a question?
Yeah.
Which is, I just want to make sure that everybody's comfortable with everything that was just covered here. That would be the first step. Is everybody clear on the terms and the implications of what Billy just reviewed, just before we go to the next?
Totally.
If
Thank you, Sophie.
I was just gonna clarify to make sure we all were on the same page, so. Thank you. I was waiting for the opportunity.
Okay,
But, so just so that we all understand, you know, you've got the grant making portion, which is gonna be our contribution to continuing to support partners that are doing missions that we're currently not doing here. And then you've got this reserve portion, which when it comes to sustainability, which I think is a great word, that's where your impact can be pushed out well over long periods of time that we're not even gonna be around for. I think about the hospital was purchased when? A long time ago. Yeah, and now, how many years later? 80 some years later, we have the opportunity because people before us invested. And that timeline was 80 years, you know, and I think I love that graph that showed the big 100 million getting money for the next 20 years, nothing for a while, and then 100 million. That's just perfect because that's not how we want to operate the board. And that time period of 31 years is only, you know, maybe 40% of the actual period that hospital was owned and managed by the board. So, you know, I think our timeline has to be extended out well past us. And that part, when you go back to the part about reserves, I think that's the part that we really have to spend some time on, because I don't think any of us here are professional investors or how we do that. And I think there's some mechanisms that we've already demonstrated we're capable of doing to allow that to go into perpetuity. I think we all want, go ahead. That's fine, yeah.
I would like to put my hand up until you finish talking, but I just wanted to.
I want to hear what you have to say, because I want it to be a conversation. I don't need a formal thought process.
No, absolutely.
I'll talk right over you.
Yeah, I want to hear from everybody.
Okay, so like, I just need to understand this a little bit. So you came back to it. Originally, when you went through it, I thought that where it says percentage grants, I thought that included the annual tax money that we get. It does.
We will. You have to.
Yes, so I just needed to clarify that includes that amount plus the money that we're gonna get over the next 30 years with the first installment of 100. So that is that. Okay, I just want to clarify that. Thank you.
Okay, now,
So to further clarify that, it's like whatever monies we have coming in, it's whether we're committing monies to grants or facilities, et cetera, but I think we're just talking about grants at the moment. And then the other goes into reserves to continue that flow, but we're pulling from those reserves progressively.
maybe.
So
Maybe
I
if you
think,
decide to.
I think the idea, and maybe, and I think the idea is to ultimately determine how much do we want to pull out of that on an annual basis to facilitate grants, programs, and real estate types of functions. So this is just very high level right now to see, to give a demonstration how you would consider utilizing those resources on a high level.
And to add on to that point, I think the bottom, you got 4 or 3 items there on the bottom right. Minimal rainy day fund, you know, that's like, oh man, we really had something come up. We have another pandemic. We got to support the community type of thing. You've got this interest only, which we're currently collecting, and we average about 1.5% per year. So it doesn't even keep up with inflation. So your money's losing value sitting there. And then you've got this above interest. And I think Billy made a good point that, you know, you have the ability, when you talk about sustainability, you can't drain the reservoir, otherwise you're gonna run out of water, right? And we know what happens in California when we run out of water, you get wildfires, it's uncontained. So you have the ability with, the way our current reserves are sitting, they're not actually doing anything but losing value at its current state, because we're not keeping up with inflation. So when he talks about above interest, that's gonna be a different style of strategic planning when it comes into how we want to invest those reserves so that you can be sustainable. Because if you currently kept on our path of how we have our reserves set aside, you will eventually lose the value that is sitting there that we currently appreciate. And so I think that part down there, understanding why those three buckets are there, are really important to decide about how we want to allocate. And Billy asked this question, so I'm going to answer what he actually asked now.
Yeah.
Allocate how you want to do this. And so when I think about it, I think about you have capital investment strategy, and then you have continuation of your current funds. And the question is like, what percent breakdown do you think we should be spending for continuation of the grant making? And then what percent do you think you should be spending towards continued capital investment that will provide that sustainability that we currently have the good fortune of being a part of because they sold this hospital that they were able to invest in so long ago. So I have a percent breakdown in my head that I think would be appropriate until you reach sustainability, because hopefully they'll be able to model it for you. Eventually you could sustain it to where all of your grant making doesn't go away. And that's an endowment where you can continue to invest the same amount over and over and over again every year with no worry of it ever going away. And to do that, it requires a large endowment to really make it possible. But if you look at how private institutions currently do it, they have large endowments at big universities and it sustains everything. Oh, you get a cut in NIH funding, no big deal. Our endowment is invested in making 6 or 8%, not 1.5%. And now they can use that money. I mean, you could take care of the whole community with the amount of money we have if we do this right.
Absolutely, if we do it right.
Well, that's what we're here. That's what we need help.
What we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just looking at the model from the healthcare district that I served on in the Bay Area, where we had a permanent endowment and our grant making was from our interest. And we actually built 2 medical office buildings by leveraging the endowment by obtaining municipal bonds, which we qualified for, and our endowment guaranteed the payment and the revenue from our medical office building paid for itself.
And then in 30 years, when it's paid off, the people that are sitting on that board can decide what to do with it. And they may do what we're doing, sell it and do it again. So.
I think that's great. Is there anybody else who wants to share their ideas or initial thoughts at this stage? Because I think it's really important. It is a new way of thinking. And so we want to give everybody the opportunity to use that in practice.
Or ask questions of each other.
Billy, would you like to move on?
I think it helps lead into the next slide.
Yes.
Definitely, but I just would love to put just sort of to amplify what Director Logson was just talking about and what Director Rogers was talking about, which is essentially when you have access to what we will call sustaining capital, it begets opportunity. And also there is, in an ideal world, and this is a later slide and we might not get to it, but for example, if real estate is a real aspiration, if building a robust real estate portfolio that is mission aligned is a priority of the district, and there are enough opportunities available to you, then it is a distinction without a difference in terms of impact. You're facilitating pillar 2, which is facilitating access while also creating a liquid asset that stands to accrue value in the long term. So to the extent, and that's where we're going to get to this, but to the extent that we can facilitate we can marshal the capital such that it is being used for its highest best purpose, with the most opportunity to offset the upfront cost, we're going to try and recommend that, so long as it isn't sacrificing mission. But I want to put that out there. And now we're on this slide. So let's just talk through 3 hypothetical scenarios. And again, this is sort of this goes back to that decision tree, but I'm just going to walk through. And again, the more comments, the more clarifiers, the better. This is truly just a discussion. These are hypothetical for purposes of the discussion, but let's imagine we're prioritizing immediate needs. The board recognizes there's some high value grant opportunities. We're in a period of time in which a lot of nonprofits have been struggling because of a lot of contextual factors. So we want to over-index on spending down the grant capital in the short term. There are going to be benefits and drawbacks to that. The first benefit is that you have more capital to deploy on high urgent needs in the immediate term. The drawbacks being that there's less capital available in the long term. And fundamentally, there's less perpetual funds, meaning that we don't establish a foundation corpus like what Director Logsdon was describing. The other key consideration, and goes directly into the strategic plan, is the fact that volume of grant making is an order of magnitude higher than what your staff currently processes. So it acts on the assumption that you have, number one, the available opportunities that are shovel ready to make grants into and deliver on the impact. And then also that you have sufficient staffing to be able to source, to qualify, to process, to monitor, and to support and manage all that magnitude of grant in year one. So it should come as no surprise. I'm not necessarily, if we were being asked to make a recommendation, we wouldn't be leaning towards scenario one. But again, we want to put everything out there, making sure that you understand sort of the full spectrum of options. Scenario two is just a middle ground. Which leads to scenario three, which is prioritizing sustainability. The idea that we want to facilitate perpetual funds, which is the benefit being that 50 years from now, 60 years from now, presumably, again, bad things happen all the time financially. Who could have anticipated 2008? Who could have anticipated 1929? There are many times where people make assumptions that if I invest in this asset, we're going to be in a great shape in 30 years. And many of those people, unfortunately, have zero bank balances right now. And so we have to, you're taking on a certain level of risk, but simultaneously you are opening yourself up to the possibility of sustainability. You're opening yourself up to the possibility of magnified impact in the long term, but not without its own considerations. First among them being the need to communicate this to community. The idea that you're not prioritizing recurring or perpetual revenue over community needs, that there's a balance, or that you're trying to kind of have a mutually beneficial scenario, that you're trying to facilitate long-term impact and address short-term needs to the extent possible. So it's much more about expectation setting, but also recognizing the fact that there needs to be realistic expectations in terms of what can be invested in, the risk tolerance that the district has, and the risk tolerance that the district is allowed to have. But the key thing is, in these two scenarios, I just want to illustrate the two spectrums of kind of the time horizons and the most pressing matters that are being solved for. One is immediate needs, one is long-term sustainability, and they both carry benefits and drawbacks. I'm curious, just any checks for understanding, and then also anything you want to raise, anything you want to push back on. Anything is welcome and encouraged. I'd love impressions to the extent possible.
Any input?
I have a comment as always. I actually like the framework that you put here, Billy. And I think when we make these decisions, I like really being detailed on the benefits, the drawbacks, and the key considerations. I mean, I think that going into especially these financial discussions, how we're going to do that, I really like how you broke that down. I mean, the scenarios on the left can obviously vary, but I think building that framework for us as we go forward is going to be really important, because I think it lays out for all of us directors. We don't have a full understanding of everything going on here and the possibilities. And it's very nice to see that drawn out in a way that's very understandable. And you can communicate that to community about how we made the decision. Here are the benefits, here are the drawbacks, here's why we decided. So thank you for structuring it that way.
Of course, and just considering exactly, we want to consider every and solve for every consideration, because the last thing we want is to fall in love with an idea that then has a huge drawback and is going to have major implications for the district. So, thank
Yeah, I
you,
mean, one
Director.
of the scenarios this year is we've had to increase our budget a couple times because we granted a bunch of budget up front to very good grants, and we realized at the end of the year we needed more. And so our scenario was a little bit different, where we had already quickly allocated all the money and didn't think, hey, maybe we should expend it out and delay some grant approval. So it's a changing of the way we process our thoughts as a board to really understand that we got to think long-term and sustainable.
And
Not so.
oh, I'm sorry, someone was speaking.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Billy.
No, I mean, that is a perfect example too, in terms of the fact that you have this sort of very significant uptick in grant making in year over year, which in and of itself, again, carries major implications. It sends a message to community that of a level of flexibility. It potentially has implications in terms of staff and workload and processing power and all of these things. Like these are all things where the ideal scenario is stability. Again, we want to be able to be responsive and reactive to moments, but at the same point, we want to right size and we want to make sure we're maximizing impact and long-term sustainability. And that's what it sounds like. But again, I want to be clear, I haven't heard from all the board members, so I don't want I don't want to ask anyone who doesn't feel inclined to speak, but also I want to make sure that
Director Smith has a
Yes.
comment. This is really helpful, and I found myself kind of going between scenario one, like, yes, prioritize immediate needs, like we got to do that. But then, of course, sustainability, which then, of course, lands us back in the middle ground. But I think in kind of trying to think this through and contextualizing it, it would be helpful as we go on and have more information as far as from our pillars and our goals and our initiatives, because that's why I'm kind of having a hard time, like, well, which one makes more sense? Because it's kind of like, well, these are all priorities, as was brought up at our last meeting. One is not more important than the other, but the costs associated with each one are going to be a little bit different, right? And it kind of brings me back to thinking about housing, which Director Rogers often brings up, and rightly so, because, originally back when we realized that a shortage of housing was going to have, the impact we're seeing it now, we didn't move fast enough, right? So we said, okay, we can do some housing here and make a little bit of an investment there. Now we're in housing crisis. And I think that we've had our needs assessment, and we understand what needs to be done, but also the urgency of it. And also acknowledging that it might not have the same costs associated with it for 30 years to get it done, right? If we're trying to increase the amount of providers, if we get something down here in the next 3 to 5 years, bring in a lot of providers, then that cost potentially over time could go down if they stay. So I just want to say for this, I think that I'll have in my mind a little bit of a better idea of where I'm leaning once I understand from here what we're prioritizing and what are we calling an immediate need. Like we must bring 100, or I don't think that was a number, but 100 providers must be brought to the Coachella Valley immediately. Okay, well, what are the programs looking like and how much is that going to cost? That looks more like scenario one, immediately. Right, so that's kind of my feedback on that.
Can I just?
Yeah, go ahead, Billy.
Can
I think we're gonna say
I
the
ask
same.
a clarifying question, Director Smith, which is when you're referring to housing, are you talking about housing for practitioners?
Housing, no, I meant just housing across the board. Housing,
Okay, so-
affordable housing, that's what I should say. Affordable housing is what I'm talking about in California. And
Absolutely.
particularly in the Coachella Valley, we'll say, because here.
So this is an enormously important sort of illustrative example in terms of this, which is there are, when you say housing and you're saying real estate, that is theoretically there is an opportunity. We've already established that in the real estate context that and again, if Jeff is on the call, please clarify or correct me if I'm wrong, but and that should just be like a banner on my Zoom screen. But the key thing is if this is a perfect example where theoretically the district could make a real estate investment where they're actually purchasing physical space potentially, and then either renting it out below market or facilitating a like some sort of a means of offsetting the costs to make it more affordable. Certainly that's the case in terms of medical facilities. And that's a perfect case where those dollars in that specific instance are 100% mission aligned, but they are also much more likely to be recouped in some form or fashion by the district. And therefore they're going to, the implication of that is that potentially, and this is your discretion, this is your vision to outline, obviously in consultation with the staff, but is ultimately, if theoretically you were to really prioritize access as a key area of deployment of capital, and let's say really real estate was the leading edge of that, then you would have a huge share of that, those types of investments that would be allocated directly towards what would amount to Pillar 2 in a certain respect. So a huge share of Pillar 2 would be represented and recoupable. And the question then is, does that then free up the remaining capital to be deployed in Pillar 1, 3, and 4? Do you want to spread it out? These are all the kind of questions where they're just very dynamic and they're very sort of responsive to the strategy. But when you add the variable of, can this be recouped in some form or fashion, or can the cost to the district be offset in some form or fashion? That is both a kind of a huge opportunity and a complexity. So we will consider all those. The other thing I wanted to say is that in some cases, these things are, we also doubling back to the legal question, is some of these things are the rule of thumb that we've been operating with is that a lot of the things that are really within the bullseye of grant making for the district, they lead with health and they can have secondary implications that are profoundly important. But there's also going to be a question, and this is more of a discussion to have on a legal side, but in some cases, something has, like many social determinants of health, have profound health implications, obviously by the definition, but may not, they may not be sort of a candidate in the giving area directly, simply because of the fact that they kind of have those health implications may be construed as indirect. They could raise a question in terms of, well, is it the purview of a health district to be investing in this? Not making a judgment on all of that, but just saying that's sort of that is the strategic lens through which we are asking and encouraging everyone to look, is sort of asking, okay, through a risk-based assessment, through a cost-benefit analysis. So just, again, we can move on, but I just wanted to say that it was a fantastic item to discuss. Does
Really,
anyone?
I just want to do a time check that we only, I think, officially have 10 minutes left. So
fine.
can we go a little bit longer? Is that all right for everybody to continue?
How much?
Like to quarter of?
Sure.
Okay, just to time check everybody, Bill.
Said it was fine.
All right.
I will have another discussion, but just to complete this discussion.
On this section of my comments, I am gonna say, so I'm leaning more towards like a middle ground, and reason being is I wouldn't want to find us in a situation where we're sitting on a whole bunch of money and that's attracting, right? We are a special district, that at some point the county could say like, hey, like, what's up with your money? And you're not like, we will still have a purpose. And of course, right, within this 5 years and the many more to come. But at some point, are we just gonna like sit on some money? Or are they gonna be like, hey, we actually wanna do something and we're gonna try to dissolve the district, take the money and repurpose it elsewhere? So hoping that's not gonna happen, that is a possibility. So that's something for us to keep in mind. That's not a call for us to go necessarily like scenario one, right? But that's something that we do have to keep in mind as we're, making these decisions or structuring, especially this part of the platform.
And President Barraza, I can say that there are a lot of foundation exemplars that confront that question that you just asked very clearly, really head on. There are a lot of the Ford Foundation. They wanted to, again, a lot of foundation. They specifically sort of found a way. I believe they issued debt on their endowment to be able to maximize their giving. There are other examples where it's called mission related investments, where essentially the corpus of the funds is they try and allocate a certain percentage. I've actually sort of tabulated what other exemplars do, and it's going to be in a report that you're going to get the chance to view. But the key thing is that there are many, many foundations who confront this exact issue. The perpetuity for perpetuity's sake is not what the purview of this district is. You are here to improve the lives of those residents of the Coachella Valley. We're trying to kind of find the perfect balance of that's why we're really trying to essentially, it's not even a circle to square. We're just trying to accommodate both very valid perspectives. So we can go. Well, does anyone else have any other questions?
I have one comment.
Sure.
And to your point, President Barraza, that's exactly why we're doing this, so that we can show strategically how we are using these resources, and we're planning for them not only today, but for future beyond us in this room. And I think that would demonstrate to like the county and other naysayers that want to come and try to take that money. If they see that we're strategically planning how to use these resources, I think that's our savior.
And it goes back to data. If you can show your impact, they're not going to come over
Right.
here. And we're going to show that.
And I would also just stipulate that I've kind of framed this as a false choice, in the sense that you could put monies in reserves and then decide year 2, you know what, we actually want to have a higher burn rate, and you're entirely within your rights to do so. None of this is permanent decision making. It allows, this is again, sort of the board had expressed a desire for a living strategy, and this is also going to be a living financial sustainability framework. But what we're trying to get at this discussion and at this juncture is a starting point. We want to really reflect today's priorities of the boards, and then give you a ton of flexibility to then take data inputs, see if we've right sized, and if not, again, incorporating Ori's incredibly important work, incorporating everything that the community is going to say as an input. And then again, this is day 1 of a very long journey.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Donetta, did you have a question?
I did. Oh, I was just gonna give my response to the question, going back to the 1, 2, or 3 scenarios. I'm leaning towards scenario 1. And for the same comments that I heard from my fellow directors about, I had the same concerns about the perception, not only the county, but also the residents. Just getting seeing our money and seeing that it's building, but not impacting lives today. That the lives that are the little ones that are growing up now, that if we just keep planning for 30 years down the road and we're not making that immediate impact or even investments for those facilities, how are we really impacting those lives? And so I'm leaning towards scenario 1. Of course, scenario 2 looks good because it's a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But I think that scenario 1 is how I feel that we would have the necessary impact that we would be planning, that we need to start planning and putting the resources into those plans now.
One key takeaway, Director DeLaura, is because, again, just stipulating, this is a discussion. These are not choices to be made right now. But one of the crucial things that I took away from that is you don't want to sacrifice the impact opportunity that comes with these funds. But simultaneously, you did mention investments as being potentially aligned, which actually we're going to have a discussion later on. Those could potentially be much more aligned with kind of reserve fund return generation. So I actually think that there's a lot of common ground. And these are not, again, meant to be like discrete choices. It's really it's temperature taking based on how we feel, so that we can tease out everyone's priorities. So again, the data that's coming out of this is incredibly helpful right now.
Just if I may.
Yeah.
The second part of that, I addressed the comments that President Barraza meant, but I didn't address the comments that Director Longston did about the investment, the fact that we only get such a small percentage of the money and on the market. But if we invest in the community, I think the return on investment is much higher. Because we're not only investing on property or facilities, but also investing in the lives that we're impacting. So I think that that is a greater investment on the community.
Any comment? We're looking at 100 million lease revenue. The district want to allocate. We also have 70 million in reserves. We also receive 8 million a year in tax revenues. I mean, we're not talking about 100 million, we're talking about this coming fiscal year, 178 million of what we have. And I think that, that needs to be brought into the picture as well.
And we are considering the totality of the resources available, but also the main thing is that sort of the top line number is overwhelming and it's an amazing sort of achievement, but then simultaneously you have so many obligations in terms and sort of to your earlier point, Director Logston, as you're right sizing the organization, that's going to require a scale up in terms of human capital costs, in terms of a lot of operating costs. So it really is, again, to that point, what I'm hearing is it's just that you owe it to the community to respond commensurate with the resources that you are about to receive on an ongoing basis, and that there would be downside effects of basically just putting that into a savings account and saying we're going to hold on to that. We're not suggesting that, but simultaneously, I also am hearing that if hypothetically we were to simply spend down the money and take it sort of in a very sort of accelerated timeline, that there would be real downsides to that as well, especially for sort of Director DeLauro was talking about thinking about like the longer term, what would happen to a child born today. Well, we're also thinking about a child born 30 years from now. And so we're really thinking kind of about squaring that circle and recognizing that that is who you have in mind. And again, just noting the complexity and we're not going to make anyone choose anything right now. But the same thing goes here. Again, these are just hypothetical. Well, they're not hypothetical numbers completely, but they're just kind of a vision of those three scenarios, what your reserve account would look like. And again, what I will say, just as a sort of baseline, is if you were to look at these sort of top line numbers, 92 million, 122 million, 152 million, those are astronomical sums of money relative to foundations, the sort of the high impact exemplar foundations. That's really a fraction of their endowments. The extent to which you have sort of the ability to, and again, we're not making recommendations, but we're trying to kind of recognize that if there is an opportunity to potentially sort of have a win-win-win and grow what might function as a sort of an endowment function for purposes of that perpetuity, that would be amazing. And then simultaneously, we don't want to sacrifice any impact, but just want to visualize that for you here. And then if we can just go to the next slide. And then this again, this is, and please apologize if this was made very quickly, but I just wanted to visualize kind of these are the three scenarios, and the key takeaway here, because there's a lot of ways that this could kind of be either misinterpreted or not in the way that I wanted to kind of facilitate the discussion. But the key thing is, this is just if you were to, I believe the assumption I made was this was sort of a $20 million annual grant making budget that increases every, I think I said 2% a year, and just wanted to visualize what the spend down would look like based on scenario 1, 2, or 3, which is we're putting 80 million towards grants, we're putting $50 million towards grants, and we're putting $20 million towards grants. The key thing here, just to put this in perspective, is that if you look at scenario 3, which is this is visualizing the kind of, this is the endowment situation where we're putting funds into the reserve account, and then we're seeing, in theory, you're thinking, oh, well, the funds are gonna exhaust by year 20. In reality, this is a situation in which all of the funds are theoretically exhausting at the exact same rate, but at the end of the line, when those funds exhaust permanently, they are gone in scenario one. Whereas if you have a functioning endowment, the net result is that you have access to supplemental sources of fund, which give you choice architecture and allow and give you flexibility to then say, okay, are we going to right size our grant making? Are we going to potentially continue on this path? Are we going to do like it's essentially just that each scenario carries a certain degree of implication in terms of what happens at the end of the day. So if we could just go to the next slide very quickly.
Can I make one comment, Billy?
Yeah.
I would like to see that too, to expand out past 30 years. I know that was a very crude model you built, but it was the pictures are always worth more than just trying to understand the words.
Sure.
It would be nice to see that extended out over a much longer period than 30 years, because just the trajectory of the curves are very telling. And the question is like, how do you kind of flatten that so you don't see that decline anywhere across the board? And I'd like to see that out over 60, 80, because we're looking at an 80-year now from when they built the hospital. It'd be nice to see what that model looks like so that we have a projection of what it's going to look like when we're all gone and not around anymore, out past 30 years.
Not if the health district's longevity work is successful. I'm going to move out there and see the fruits
You
of
live
this
a long
labor.
time out here.
No, but so yes, 100%. We can extend this out. I'll extend this out as far as I'll do many scenarios to extend it, but exactly, yeah. The 30 years was a sort of, it was too narrow of a window.
It was good.
And part of what I believe that you'll see theoretically is if you're doing 80 million for potentially a year in grant funding, you're gonna see that fund be zero. Where if you're doing something more strategically lower, you'll have perpetuity of those funds. So, I mean, keeping that in mind, yes, we want to put much money out there for the best purposes that we can, but we also have to do this strategically so that we don't have directors in the room 30 years from now saying, what in the heck were they thinking? Spending all this money, yes, they wanted to help the community and the residents, but they could have managed it better so that we could have long-term benefit for residents in the future, not just now.
But we could be investing in facilities that we like.
Absolutely.
That curve would look different. If you did what you just said, that curve would actually slope upwards.
Absolutely,
It would
because
be-
you're returning.
Billy, I'm sure we'll model that at some point for you.
Yes.
What a modest, if you looked at a modest 4% or 5% return, that curve looks completely different. And you're gonna be like, wait a minute, in 30 years, we have to be giving away $30 million because otherwise it just keeps going at a rate you can't keep up with.
And to your point, Director Delara, there's return on investment with the people that we invest in and community. But we also want to make sure that we're retaining resources in perpetuity to help generate that return that we don't see in the bank account.
Well, and also, we're looking at $100 million year one. We're looking at $20 million year two,
Exactly.
2027. And for 10 more years, another 20 million a year that we're looking at for the district as income.
Yeah, but after that, we lose those
Right. But that's
resources coming in, so we have to manage. them.
And no, it's a great point, Director Rogers. And the key thing though is that no matter what, if I'm a community member and I'm accustomed to a grant making cadence of, let's say, $15 to $20 million per year based on that lease revenue, and then it just ends. That carries its own sort of complications for the district versus potentially having either right sizing it in terms of the actual burn rate of the grant making, or offsetting those losses with the things that we're talking about. If you have a mission aligned real estate investment, that's a perfect example where exactly as Director Logson and Director Delar were talking about, it's like if assuming at the incredible rates of growth that the Coachella Valley has, if you have these assets that are continually growing in value, not only is that an opportunity whenever you need to liquidate to have additional resources at the ready, but in the meantime, if it's mission aligned, you're having that direct impact on that same exact day. So it is just sort of again, I don't want to sound like a salesman saying it's a win-win, but it is just as an honest appraisal, it is an opportunity when it is truly mission aligned and community connected, that it can create value both for the district in the short and the long term.
Billy, would this be replaced?
Your Henry's? Yeah, I was just gonna mention what Dan was saying about building it out past the 30 years, because in 30 years, in the 30 years, you're gonna get another 100 million. And so you need to plan for that as well, so that, like you were saying, to build out past the 30th year. What are you gonna do with that 100 million?
Billy will tell us.
Well, and part of this is defining what we will ultimately then take to our investment broker so that they can plan accordingly how to invest those resources.
Those are pretty fixed, you know that. We can't do much with what we're currently.
Well, no, but it depends on, because they've got to strategize when they're going to disperse funds to us. So they can't do everything in 5-year bonds. They're going to have to do some, either that or have them staggered to where they time out.
Correct.
I mean, we can't invest for more or less on return, but
That'd probably be good to get Billy in touch with them at some point as we really get into the modeling of what the timing of those bond releases are.
well, and that's kind of why I'm hoping to kind of figure it out here, because if we're going to spend $80 million of that 100 million right away, that's a very different investment strategy than if we're only deploying, say, 20 million.
Absolutely. And Director Logson, even the data point you said, which is that the reserves are right now generating below inflation rates, is an important consideration. As like these are all data points. So I would love to discuss that with the investment advisor, but also, yes, we will incorporate a lot of assumptions into the model. But again, it will be a model, they will be assumptions, but they will ideally help to make a more informed decision. And the better evidence that we can have, the better the quality of data input into each of those categories is going to produce a much more useful model. But yes, exactly. We have to take into account the fact that it's not like it's a debit card where you can just say, okay, today I'm ready to cash out. We understand those implications, and we will act accordingly. Okay, so in the interest of time, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's what I was gonna say. We have about 7 minutes to bring it up to 6
Okay.
minutes.
Okay, so this is a second kind of I'm actually, you know what, given the fact that we have 8 minutes to do this, and this is another big discussion, I'm just
Yeah,
gonna
I was
I'm-
just about to say, Billy,
yeah,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I was just about to say, I think we've accomplished our objective of starting the conversation and getting everybody comfortable with the objectives and the definitions and the things that we have to consider at a high level while we're developing this plan. So I think that it would be probably a good time to stop and then just let you know that we are going to work with Andrea to schedule a second session with the board to continue this discussion. And I think we can pick up there. What do you think, Billy?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was gonna
That's
make an
a
April.
lot of information for everybody, you know?
Yeah, no, I was gonna make an April Fool's joke, but it's just too late in the day.
All right, thank you so much, Billy.
What we're gonna go and do is open really quickly for public comment. And then we'll do closing remarks from board members.
Okay.
Any public comment?
Right. Dr. Sullivan, do you have any public comments?
Yeah, just once.
Okay, you have 3 minutes.
I just want to point out that historically, there has always been times when there's been shortages of hospitals and health groups and so forth. if you think about National Institutes of Health, they used to be the National Institute of Health, and now they have 20 of them. So I really like the concept of thinking about taking your money and creating a satellite that is health education and training, maybe in life or Salt City or wherever you decide, because it will generate revenue. At USC, when I came there in 1982, we didn't even have a student health center. And now they have a beautiful student health center that has a gym. It's open 24 hours. There's OBGYN clinic, things they need for students. But you could do something like that in places that really have nothing. And now you've extended your model into the community where they need you. And that's all I was gonna say.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Patty, did you have any public comments? Ms. Patani, no. Any comments from closing remarks from the board?
I have a
Director
comment.
Bernardo?
Carol and Director Longson.
Okay.
Okay, I wanted you to hear, I brought up at the last meeting at the tail end that I wanted to bring up the heart issue and bringing it up again, because I believe that what we had agreed in the past has been that before staff actually expends any resources, time, effort, and so forth, that they needed to know whether there was consensus from the board for them to do that. And so I don't know if you got that last time or not, but what I was hoping for at our next meeting in April, our next board meeting, that there will be something that will be coming out of staff. And so therefore, in order for that to happen, that if we could take a consensus on whether we can direct staff to put some effort and resources into this to bring us something back in April for some ideas of, is there some way that we could support that heart? Is there 1, 2, 3, 4 options, going from this one to no, but that's what I wanted to have come back in April, because I heard Jenna loud and clear earlier what their situation is. And I just think that it would be in our best interest as well as theirs is to know whether there is anything that the healthcare district can offer. Is there something so I just wanted to see if there is consensus from the board to provide direction to staff to expend some time and energy in bringing something back in April.
Any comments from other board members on that?
Thumbs up?
Well, pretty quickly, not contradicting or not saying that's not help, but again, I think that it should be coming from heart. It should be them determining what it is that they need help with and how they would need that help. And then, of course, you have that communication with our staff, but I don't think that it should be us trying to design something that's gonna work for them. It's something that they have to work on their own and let us know how they believe we would tie into that. That's my thought.
I think that's what they told us last time when she was here, and I think she told us that again today, that they need help, and I think she has ideas, and I know staff wants to hear from her, and I think that there's gonna be conversations that need to happen. And for staff, I think Chris asked us last time, is there consensus? And I don't know if he got it. I don't think he did. So
I did, because I didn't leave with that on my notes.
Exactly. So I wanted just to
Do we-
provide that consensus.
What I could
Consensus?
What I could suggest is that we could bring it as an agenda item on our F&A committee next week for discussion at that level.
So, with the, we have consensus from the board to, ask staff to engage in those communications with HARC and then report to.
Yes.
Okay,
We do
committee
have-
and then,
I didn't get to say anything.
no, I'm asking. you if
They're
you
being
have-
made already. I think that we should first see how they can, if they're at a point where they can put time into that.
Mhm.
We're getting close to the end of the fiscal year. They might have a lot of things, they already stated here that we needed more staff in the office. I think we should take that into consideration. I know that there is a lot of needs in the community. But we also have to be conscious of what we have to work with. We can't just be like, oh, here you go, you can do it or whatever.
So that's why I think it's engaging in that conversation. We wouldn't be asking them to actually do anything or plan anything out. I think it's important, again, in my opinion, that it comes from them. And it's not something that we're designing a plan that's gonna work for them. I think it's because if we don't wanna get in that, pattern that we're gonna do this for them. And then some other organizations are gonna expect us to meet them at that same level. So I think it's important for any organization out there that does need help to actually determine, right? Jenna did mention that the financial troubles. So if we say like, well, we have some options for you, to Yvette's point, are we gonna have our staff working on that to try to provide solutions? And then are they gonna be solutions that are gonna help them survive in the long run? Or is it just gonna help them within 1 year? Or I think that for me, it would be important to hear from them and exactly what it is that they need as an organization. I actually have thoughts and ideas on how they could be incorporated to the work that we're doing at different levels or different ways. I'm not sure if we're there to like just dedicate staff to work on it, but I believe that we are in a position to actually provide direction or be a consensus for them to engage in those conversations and hear them out and hear from her.
And we did meet with Jenna the other day and made some suggestions. I don't know how fruitful they can be, but I think maybe that we can agendize it for F&A and have some discussion at the committee level where Jenna can come and speak more in more detail than just a 3-minute public comment section, because there were some specific items that were talked about. And now it's a plea for, help. So yeah, we need to talk about more of the details, and maybe I'm continuing.
What's the normal process for requesting, it sounds like financial assistance from us? I mean, we have a process in place, right?
Well, for grant requests.
So I'm asking, yeah, so I think we gotta make sure that we follow the process.
Grant program sponsors.
Well, I'm just saying, I think we have to be careful. Like, I spent a lot of time talking to her last meeting. It was excellent. We have to make sure we treat everybody the same. If there's a process and how we do things, we need to stick to the process. We cannot deviate from the process, because I think to your point, Director Barraza, is that then you're gonna open this up to saying, well, they do this for this, or we're gonna do it for this one. I just want to make sure that we are very policy driven in how we make our decisions going forward. We can go look at it, but do we look at it for any other organization? Once we take out the subjective feelings towards that organization, how are we doing it? We just got to make sure do that. You can come up on the agenda for the F&A if we would like to, but we don't do that for any other process. So I just want to make sure our processes are consistent across the board. So.
And that has been our problem. That has been an issue in the past that we have spoke already about, that certain people, it seems like certain people don't follow the guidelines that we have set forth.
I think that would be the direction I would ask the staff, is just to follow that guidelines about how we treat them the same as everybody else.
And I differ in that what Chris is proposing is that it be agendized for the finance, legal, admin meeting. That's not our normal process. Let's have the conversation, let's find out more. And as to this not being treated as being the process, we have flexibility. We have some flexibility. We can explore an idea. And if we decide at that time, when it comes to the board, yes, we are the ultimate decision makers. So at that time, if we decide, no, we don't want to do this, then we can. But I want to know what is their situation? Do we have an option? Is it going to benefit the district? Because I hear over and over again about evaluation being a key component of our plan moving forward. And we've already invested a lot of money through the years. Do we just let it go? Or do we looking at it, different ideas that staff could consider?
I would.
We denied a couple of grants this past program meeting because we did not have the funds to help, right? The funds to give them grants. And what are those people that we denied a month ago gonna say about us now making special consideration or whatever for this position? I know we have invested a lot of money into them and everything,
But everything has a process and everybody has and everything has a timeline. And I think we need to continue to follow that.
Would there be any like amendment to like the consensus, or would there be anything that you'd be okay with maybe agreeing to tonight? Or just if not, then I guess we don't have consensus and we could just talk about this later.
I think we treat them the way we treat everybody else, come through the grant process.
Okay. So we do not have consensus at the moment or during this meeting, so we'll continue the conversation at a later time. Right, with that, meeting adjourned. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Luego, mis amigos.
Organizer.
You're gonna go? I trust. Yeah.
Read my mind.
It's.
You know, literally have it.